Hello everybody, this is Professor F and
Professor E.
and we're doing our final review for Global. We're going to go unit by unit, starting off with the French Revolution and...
Yeah.
Are we going to include Napoleon in this?
No, we can do Napoleon in the beginning of the second one. So each video is its own unit. So how many videos you got?
It's 10, something around 10 or 12, something like that.
So
To start off, we're going to go way back to the French Revolution, where...
Oh, wait. But they might not be able to see the certain section.
Can we see everything?
Yeah. I'll start like...
Alright, you got it. So, Matthew's going to be doing a lot of the writing and connecting, bringing up enduring issues. I'm going to just be doing a lot of talking. So,
Trevor's more content based. I'm like kind of more abstract.
when we go back to 18th century France, we know that it was divided into 3 estates. The first estate, which was the clergy, which is religious people. The second estate, we have the nobles, which was the people of power and royalty. And then the third estate, some might call it the most important estate, which was everybody else. From poor peasants to wealthy merchants, this estate was called the bourgeoisie. And despite the fact that they made up 97% of the population, they still had by far the least amount of power, and they paid...
Injustice. That's why they revolted.
Yep, and they paid almost all the taxes.
Yeah, because the king needed relations with the nobles, so they didn't want to.
So, at the top of everything, King Louis XVI ruled in absolute power. He lived in luxury at the Palace of Versailles, which comes up many times throughout the year. He spent a lot of money. He honestly had really bad spending habits, which put the country in a pretty significant debt.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like from war or anything of significance. It was just honestly dumb spending.
Building palaces and stuff.
Yeah.
That also led to inflation. You know, when the economy's also going down, then they print more money, then that happens to inflation.
So they were having economic problems. The people were starving. And honestly, like, unemployment was raising. So the people obviously weren't happy. They were living terrible lives. And all of a sudden, these new ideas started to spread from, as we know, revolutionary ideas from Enlightenment thinkers. So we learned about a few, honestly. How do you pronounce these names?
Rousseau and Voltaire.
Rousseau and Voltaire.
I butchered that.
Whatever. So they spread these ideas that the people, they didn't have to accept these unfair conditions. They didn't have to live in turmoil, and that they had rights, and that the governments were meant to be serving the people, not themselves. So now France, they were ready.
Yep.
So now we go to step 2.
Alright, which is, I don't want to do the 6-step thing.
Alright, all you.
Because y'all been hearing that all year. So I'm going to do before, during, and after.
Okay. So now it's sort of, I'd still say it's before.
Well, okay, I'll do during when we get to the...
Yeah. So, France was in crisis in the year 1789. Louis XVI, the king we were talking about, he called the Estates General, which was a meeting. It had representatives from all 3 estates. It was the clergy, as we said, the nobles, and the peasants. And it was the first time it had been called in 175 years. But nothing came from it. Nothing changed because the first and second estate had much more voting power than the third estate. So despite the third estate having way more people, they couldn't get anything done.
Yeah. He didn't call the States General to actually improve stuff. He called it to like save himself.
Make himself look good. And because of that, the third estate, they broke off. They called they called themselves.
Wait, this is during this.
Yes, this is during. They broke off. They called themselves the National Assembly. That's what they called themselves.
Oh, tennis court.
Yes, and swore the tennis court oath, which was a promise that they made to each other to write a new constitution. So, in 1789, the year this all happened, the people of Paris stormed the Bastille, which was a prison that symbolized a lot of royal power, and that was the official start of the French Revolution. And it was a huge symbol to the people of France. I'll let Matthew write.
Thank you. For them slowly, and then it's going to the Bastille. And then we will read this.
like revolution's a big thing, especially if you want to compare and contrast different things. And I feel like over here you have abuse of power, and
Definitely.
exactly, and again, abuse of power means a lot of different things. This abuse of power, he abused power for himself. I mean, you don't really see this a lot.
Yeah.
This is really just selfish
Yeah,
and stupid
selfish.
stuff.
Yeah, it's just selfish.
Again, this is old. People were more dumb in the olden days. But
So, now we go to step 3, which is,
make sure they could.
yeah, this is definitely like the big during. So the National Assembly, they got to work. They wrote the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. If they can't read, they can always zoom in, whatever.
Yeah, they got it.
So they wrote the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, which, if you guys remember the 3 main things that they included, it was liberty, equality, and fraternity. Those were what they said were the basic rights that all humans should have.
Yep. Human rights is a big thing. You get something about this. You could talk about if you get like this, and then maybe something that's breaking human rights. You can say it breaks it, and then you can say how people protect that. And this was an example of how you can protect human rights. What was it called?
Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. So liberty, equality, and fraternity, they were inspired by the United States to use something of that sort. I don't know if you guys know what the United States big 3 are. Do you know?
What? I'm sorry.
Like the United States version of that.
No, it's just peace, land, and
No, that's not it.
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it's the pursuit of happiness.
Oh, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness.
Yeah,
that's
that's what I
different.
thought.
It's kind of different though.
Okay. Continuing.
Yeah.
So they were actually pretty successful at the start. They turned France into a limited monarchy with a constitution. So they now had a constitutional monarchy. They created what was called the Legislative Assembly, and they tried to share power with the king. There were a lot of reforms that went on. There was now freedom of the press. There were more fair taxes, and there were new laws for the church and religion. So they made a lot of progress at the start.
Yeah.
So women like
We don't know, bro.
can you read that?
Olympe de Gauche.
Okay, Olympe de Gauche. Oh, this was the Declaration of the Rights of Women, which was very similar to the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which was demanding equality for women too. So with this revolution also came
Very
sort of
progressive.
yeah, they were very progressive. They came with sort of a suffrage movement. But many believed that this wasn't enough progress and the revolution can't end here, and people were still hungry, radicals were waiting. So now we get to step 4, which was the rule of the radicals. So,
I actually have heard of them called radical. Because, progress is slow, especially when you're trying to bounce back to something. That's why a lot of war-torn countries become very radical.
so the Jacobins were formed, which was a group of people led by none other than Maximilien Robespierre. They took control of France, they abolished the monarchy, and they declared the first French Republic. King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, 2 leaders of France at the time, were executed by guillotine. So they were murdered publicly, which was a very huge moment for the revolution.
Yep.
And honestly, this looked like the start of a lot of great things, but it didn't really go that way. So radical leader Jean-Paul Marat, he wrote a newspaper. He wrote newspapers like Friend of the People. So I don't really remember that
Really,
exactly.
he just made lists of people that that people thought that were speaking out.
Yeah.
It really just it sparked fear, and I feel like fear is a good way to gain the power of the people.
Exactly. It stirred up anger across Paris.
Yeah.
And the poor working class women, they demanded full equality. They wanted full rights, the same as any noble man, and that was once again very progressive. And it sort of shows that maybe the French Revolution was a little bit ahead of its time.
Yeah.
So this was no longer a peaceful revolution and uprising. It had gone much more south, which is when we get into the Reign of Terror. So Robespierre, he created the Committee of Public Safety, which was a group with the authority to arrest and execute anyone seen as an enemy. So the thing that's a little bit interesting about this is that who gives him the power to determine who's the enemy and who's the ally, especially because
You have,
people who go from no power to a lot of power tend to abuse it.
yeah. That's, like Marat throws your name in a newspaper and now you're dead.
So throughout the next only year or two, around like a few thousand people were killed by the guillotine. It was nobles, it was former allies, and honestly, it was even revolutionaries that they didn't think were radical enough. So Robespierre, he believed terror is justice, which was sort of the mindset of this part of the French Revolution. But in the end, he too was executed, and the people turned against the violence. They were tired, traumatized, and desperate for stability, which is when we get into the reaction.
I'm gonna say outcome.
Do we want to talk about Napoleon and the outcome now? Or
Well,
how
because
long is this? Let me see.
Reaction.
Yeah, we can talk about
How
Napoleon.
much is this?
Like 10 minutes.
Oh, it's go.
So, we get into the reaction, which is sort of France after this. Now they have nobody ruling their country. They have no stability. There's little wars going on everywhere. And in the wake of terror, France, they created a new government called the Directory, which was and it was an oligarchy. It was 5 people. It was
no, here you go.
a 5-man executive body, and it kept the republic, but it also like restored some old order.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a compromise from the absolute radicalness to the olden ways. But the problems were not over because the Directory, it was weak, it was corrupt, the old tensions came back, and honestly this revolution had changed France forever. But soon a young man named Napoleon Bonaparte would rise up, and he came out of nowhere, honestly, and he took over.
I feel like, especially when there's a lot of corruption, you kind of need a really strong ruler to, set you straight. They look for Robespierre, but he turned out to be, not that good. And then they turned into Napoleon, and it turned out alright.
Wait a minute. Actually, we're gonna do Napoleon in the next video because we feel like he deserves his own, and we want to keep these videos short for you guys.
Yes.
So,
Alright.
Professor F and
Professor E.
signing off.
See ya later.